I love New York style cheesecakes, but sometimes they can be a bit heavy for me. So I designed mine with a lighter texture. My baking method ensures the creamiest cheesecake from the direct center all the way to the outer edge. Because I love cream cheese, I leaned into the natural acidity, also adding some sour cream to boost the tanginess and also balance the sweetness. All right, let's start with the pan. There are two main types that are used for cheesecake. There's the Springform pan and a cheesecake pan. Both pans ensure that you can lift the delicate cheesecake custard without damaging the sides. If it makes more sense, standard cake pans require you to invert the pan to remove the cake, which would destroy a cheesecake. So let's quickly go over the differences between the two. The Springform pan has a latch that releases the sides from the base, and this makes removal really easy, hence why it's so popular with home bakers. But the latch can loosen and rust over time. The seal isn't always perfect. If you're using a water bath, this can mean leaks either in or out. And some models also have a recessed bottom, making lifting the finished cheesecake kind of tricky. Then there's the cheesecake pan with a flat metal base that sits snugly inside the pan's ring, and it forms a really tight seal, which makes it great for water baths. Releasing the sides can be a little bit trickier, but a warm cloth around the outside usually helps the custard loosen up slightly so that you can release the metal band. And plating the cheesecake onto a platter from this one is really easy. You just slide a long spatula underneath and lift. I'll be using an 8-inch Springform pan for this recipe since it's the most common choice that most people have at home. Okay, first I'm going to start with the crust, which means I have to prep my pan. But first I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 and then take my Springform pan and spray along the bottom with cooking oil. To my food processor, I'm going to add my graham crackers, brown sugar, and salt and pulse until finely ground. Then I'll pour in the melted butter and pulse until the mixture resembles a wet sand, which sticks together when I press it. You can also do this in a zip top bag and a rolling pin. And next I'll pour the crumbs into the prepared pan and press into a flat layer with a flat bottomed glass or measuring cup. This step is called pre-baking. It helps set the crust by melting the sugar slightly, which helps bind the crumbs. It also toasts the graham crackers through the Maillard reaction, and that's going to boost flavor and help prevent a soggy base once the batter goes in. This gets baked for about 10 minutes and your kitchen will smell amazing. That's the Maillard reaction at work. Then I'm going to let this crust cool completely at room temperature while I prepare the cheesecake filling. I'm going to reduce the oven to 250 Fahrenheit to keep it a little bit warm while I prep the filling. One key detail here is to make sure that all of your ingredients are at room temperature or slightly warmer. So for the cream cheese, I usually microwave it straight from the fridge on a plate for about 20 seconds, and it should be easy to press with the paddle attachment. I'll then add the sugar and mix on low speed for 5 to 7 minutes. Staying on low keeps air out of the batter because too much air will cause it to puff up like a souffle, which we don't want. This cheesecake should be dense, creamy, and smooth with as few air bubbles as possible. And mixing the cream cheese with the sugar first is also important. The sugar draws the water out from the cream cheese and dissolves into it, which forms a syrup. You'll know that it's ready when the cheesecake batter starts to look smooth and a little bit loose. Now, once the cream cheese is fully broken down, I'll add the eggs one at a time, mixing until just incorporated. Next, in goes the room temperature sour cream and vanilla. So in my last video, I compared different types of dairy for this part, either sour cream, Greek yogurt, heavy cream, or mascarpone. They're all going to change the flavor and texture slightly, as well as the bake time. For this classic version, I'm sticking with sour cream. I think it adds a nice acidity and gives us a lighter texture. And I'll mix for about 2 to 3 more minutes on low speed just until the batter is silky smooth and runs off the spatula very easily. Now I have to prep the cheesecake pan with the pre-baked crust. So I brush off any excess crumbs from the side. This will give me a cleaner look, and spray with oil along the sides, which is going to help me remove the cheesecake later on. Then I'll just scrape all of the cheesecake filling into the pan. And if you trust your pan's seal, which I do, this is a newer pan for me, I'm going to gently tap it on the counter to bring any large air bubbles to the surface. And then I also run a toothpick across the top to pop any that rise up. Next, I'll lower the oven to around 215 and place the cheesecake on the center rack. In my Cheesecake Science video, I compared different baking methods, including using a water bath. But my favorite was this very low and slow approach, as I found this gave me the creamiest texture without the fuss of the water bath. Inevitably, the trickiest part of baking a cheesecake is knowing when it's done. This cheesecake bakes for about 2 hours and 30 minutes to about 2 hours and 50 minutes, and I usually start checking around the 2 hour and 20 mark. So what do I do to check? If you can, I highly recommend an instant read thermometer, and I'll link a few in the description below. I stop baking when the direct center reaches about 155. But what if you don't have a thermometer? Well, some bakers use the jiggle test, and this is more of a qualitative measurement that comes with experience. My observations are gonna maybe look different than yours, but I'm gonna do my best to explain it. So at 130 Fahrenheit, the whole cheesecake will wobble from edge to edge. At 140, it's still soft, but it's just starting to set on the edges. At 150, there's a more stable ring forming around the edge that wobbles less than the center. And at 155, the center gently wobbles, and about a 1 to 1.5 inch perimeter that is more firm. This is the sweet spot for knowing when my recipe is done. And once it is done, I let it cool in the oven with the door cracked about 1 to 2 inches for 1 hour. During that time, the internal temperature will rise about 5 degrees, bringing it above 160, and that ensures that the eggs are fully cooked and safe to eat. And it also creates a perfectly smooth custard-like texture from the direct center all the way to the edge. Now we have to be just as careful about lowering the temperature of the cheesecake as we were about raising the temperature or baking it. Cheesecake custards are pretty finicky. They have a low egg protein content, which forms a really delicate gel. And this gel contracts or gets tighter as it cools. This is natural, but we need that contraction to be slow and gentle. Otherwise, the cheesecake will crack in the softer spots. So after it's been in the oven for about an hour, I move the cheesecake to a warm temperature spot, usually near the stove, for another 1 to 2 hours. Then after that, while it's still in the pan, I wrap it tightly in plastic and refrigerate it for at least 6 hours, but ideally overnight. This is also a great stopping point if you plan to serve the cheesecake a day or two later. About an hour before serving, I remove the cheesecake from the fridge and remove the sides of the Springform pan from the cold cheesecake. It should be very easy and slide right off since I sprayed the sides with cooking oil. It's a lot easier to handle the cheesecake when it's cold, so if you plan on serving it on a platter, it's best to remove it from the base plate right now. Now this particular pan has a raised plate, so it's really easy for me to slide a spatula in between the cheesecake and pan to release it. However, there are a lot of Springform pans that have a recessed edge, and in that case, I almost always leave the cheesecake in the pan because you risk cracking it when you try to remove it. It's normal to see a bit of condensation on top, and you can gently blot that with a paper towel. That's just the sugar in the cheesecake drawing moisture from the air and creating a sweet syrup on top. And while that warms up, I slice up some fresh strawberries and macerate them with a little bit of sugar. Again, the sugar is going to pull out water, so it's pulling water out of the strawberry, and this creates a sweet strawberry flavored syrup. And when it's time to serve, I'll take some heavy cream that I've whipped to soft peaks with a little bit of sugar and gently spread that along the top of the cheesecake. Some people like to do berries first and then cream. I like it the other way around. I think it looks prettier, and then I often serve some extra cream and berries on the side.